The desert sun carried a hard truth in its glare, the kind that stripped a person down to whatever grit they had left. Anyone who walked those plains knew that life out there demanded something from you every single day. 3 times a day, in fact. Sunrise tested your will. Midday tested your strength. Sundown tested your spirit. Most folks learned to bow under those tests, but some learned to stand straighter. That was the kind of woman Alara had grown into, whether she wanted to or not. She stood at the edge of the wooden trough, breath tight and shallow as the heat rolled across the settlement like an invisible wave. Her clothes clung to her, dusted with powdery sand carried on the wind. The old mountains waited in the far distance with a patient silence only giants could keep. Behind her, a line of weathered cabins stretched across the land, shaped by rough wood and the stubborn hope of settlers trying to stake a life where the earth gave nothing for free. Illyra's hands trembled as she leaned against the trough. Not from weakness, though the last months had worn her down, but from the weight she carried. She was close, far closer than she wanted to admit. Her breath hitched, sharp as a blade, and for a moment she closed her eyes against the burning sky. Then she felt the steadying grip on her arms, strong and warm. The man behind her stood tall and silent, his presence steady as bedrock. His name was Casa, a warrior of the Apache. The morning light touched the bronze of his skin and the black braid running down his back. A single feather rested above his ear, unmoving despite the wind. Though he rarely wasted words, every look he gave seemed to speak something deep. Something carved from the old world long before cabins and fences scarred the land. Most settlers kept their distance from the Apache, fear whispering louder than truth. Yet Casa had walked into their lives when the desert wanted to take everything from them. He had given warnings of storms, guided them toward hidden water, and stood watch on nights when trouble prowled the horizon. Some called him a ghost of the mountains. Others said he carried the old spirits with him. Alara had learned to simply trust him. Now he watched her with that same quiet intensity. "You must breathe steady," said voice low, shaped by the rhythm of the desert. "The child will need your calm." Alara gave a dry laugh that lacked any joy. "Hard to stay calm when the world's trying to split me in half." Casa did not smile, but something in his eyes softened. His hands remained firm on her arms, keeping her upright as another wave of pain swept through her. She gritted her teeth, refusing to cry out. There was a time for fear, but this was not it. She had survived too much already on long trails that pulled her. From one horizon to the next, a shout carried from across the settlement. Jiran and Flint hurried toward them, boots tearing through sand. Jiran, tall and broad-shouldered, had a look carved by a lifetime of labor. Flint, lean and sharp-eyed, carried a rifle slung over one shoulder. Both men slowed as they reached the trough, exchanging uneasy glances with Casa. "She all right?" Jiran asked, rubbing sweat from his brow. His gaze darted from Alara's pale face to her swollen belly. Alara drew a breath, steadying herself. "I'm standing, aren't I?" Flint shifted, his voice tight with worry. "We should move her out of the sun. Casa, help us get her to the cabin." Casa shook his head once. "Not yet. The water will cool her. The heat presses too hard on her chest. She must stay here until she breathes easier." Flint looked ready to argue, but Jiran placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let him be. He's kept her alive this far." While the men stood, the wind lifted a thin veil of dust around them. The desert carried stories in that dust, some old, some dangerous, some waiting to be told. Alara felt each grain against her skin like a whisper from the earth itself, urging her to endure. The settlement had not always been a place of fear. When they first arrived, they believed they could shape the land into something good. They built the cabins with eager hands and planted seeds with hopeful hearts. But the land pushed back. Water ran low. Heat crushed their strength. And some nights carried a silence so empty it felt alive. Then came the day the riders appeared. Dark figures on the ridge. Eyes watching the settlement with hunger. They never approached. They did not need to. Their presence alone made nights colder and mornings shorter. And though Alara never saw their faces clearly, she knew danger when it watched her. Casa had warned them about those riders. He said they moved like wolves, circling, waiting for weakness. They took supplies from travelers and left none alive who resisted. His voice held no fear, only certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from knowing how shadows move across the plains. Now, as another pain tightened through Alara, Flint scanned the horizon. Riders were seen near the ridge before sunrise. We should be ready. Jaren stiffened. If they come now, we're in no shape to fight. Alara forced out a breath. There's always something waiting to strike when I'm at my worst. Casa turned his head slightly, listening in that quiet way of his. Trouble comes when it chooses, not when we are ready. Alara gripped the edge of the trough harder, knuckles white. She had endured storms, hunger, loss, but now she stood on the edge of something far greater, something that demanded her courage in a different way. She felt the weight of it deep inside her, both terrifying and miraculous. The child moved. A reminder that time waited for no one. Cass's voice dropped to a gentle tone. Do not fear the path. Fear blinds you. You must see clearly. Lara swallowed hard. I see clearly enough. I see that nothing about this land lets anyone rest. That is why you will survive it, he replied. Another shout cut across the wind. This one sharp, urgent. A young scout ran toward them, breathless, pointing behind him. They are coming. Flint cursed under his breath. Jaren reached for his belt knife, as if the small blade would make a difference. The settlement erupted into hurried movement. Women gathered children. Men rushed to secure doors and grab what weapons they had. Even the animals stirred nervously in their pens. Alara felt her chest tighten again, though this time not from pain alone. Fear pressed hard, threatening to steal the strength she had left. Casa stepped in front of her. Eyes narrowed at the distant ridge. His shoulders squared, muscles coiled with silent purpose. They come fast. There is no time to move you. Flint raised his rifle. We need to fall back to the cabins, Okasa said. If you run now, they will cut you down before you reach shelter. They want the settlement. They want fear. We must stand where the ground is open. Jaren looked between Alara and the horizon. What about her? Alara forced her breathing steady. Don't worry about me. Just do what you must. Casa took one step closer to the trough. His eyes met hers with a calm she did not understand. Not then. Not yet, Alara, he said with quiet conviction, 3 times a day. The desert tests us, morning, midday. Night you have passed every one. But now comes the test that changes everything. The wind shifted. Dust swirled in a rising spiral. The ridge darkened with approaching figures. Alara gripped the trough as another. Wave of pain surged through her. Casa placed a hand on the hilt of the blade he carried, his voice steady as stone. The Apache's next action will decide the fate of all who stand here. He stepped forward, and then everything. Changed, Casa moved toward the open. Stretch of sand as if he were part of the earth itself. His steps were slow, unhurried, almost too calm for the danger rolling toward them. The riders on the ridge grew clearer by the second, their horses kicking up clouds of dust that curled into the wind. Alara watched him, chest tight, breath uneven. Pain worked through her again, sharp enough to bend her forward, but she refused to fall. She held to the trough and forced her body to stay upright. Jaren and Flint stood on either side of her, unsure if they should stay to protect her or run to join Casa. Neither choice felt right. The whole settlement had frozen into a strange quiet. It's a kind that sits on your skin and waits to see what happens next. Casa raised one hand, palm open to the desert. A signal, a warning, a promise. Nobody in the settlement knew the meaning behind the gesture, but the riders must have. They slowed, breaking from a fast charge into a cautious approach. That alone sent a ripple through the small crowd gathering behind Alara. Whoever those men were, they were not reckless. They were calculating. They had faced warriors before and knew when to push and when to hold back. Alara swallowed against the dryness in her throat. Her mind drifted back months earlier, before the riders, before the danger, before Casa became part of her world. They had been traveling then. A small band of families moving west to escape the drought and famine that had swept across the eastern plains. Water had turned scarce. Soil had cracked open and swallowed seeds whole. They had lost people on the road, lost hope more than once. Ilara remembered the weeks they wandered with almost nothing left. She remembered her husband Rowan, who had been their guide. He believed the mountains held a better life. He believed they could carve a future out of the harsh land if they were brave enough to try. She remembered his voice, steady and certain, telling her that the West always tested people before it welcomed them. And she remembered the night he didn't return. They had set camp near a dry riverbed. Rowan told her he would go a short distance to look for fresh water. He promised her he would return by moonrise. Ilara waited with a lantern burning low, her hands curled over her stomach, whispering to the child she carried. The night stretched too long. The silence felt wrong. The mountains that usually stood like guardians seemed to turn their backs. Rowan never came back. They searched for him at sunrise, calling his name until their throats burned. They found nothing but tracks leading toward the rocks, tracks that vanished as if swallowed by the land itself. That day, Geron and Flint promised they would not leave her alone. They would help her finish Rowan's dream. They would reach the West. They would build something real. But dreams felt thin when danger waited at every horizon. That was when Casa first appeared. The memory came clear as the present. The group had been on the edge of collapse, food low, horses exhausted. Ilara remembered Flint pointing to a lone figure standing on a distant ridge, watching them with unreadable eyes. Jaren called out, warning him not to come closer. But the man ignored the warning. He descended the slope with the steady pace of someone who knew the land's every shape. He introduced himself by placing his palm over his chest and giving his name in a firm tone. Casa, no more than that. No story. No past. No explanation. His presence alone felt like a story. Jaren, unsure whether he meant harm, kept his knife close. Flint stayed near the rifles, but Casa did not reach for any weapon. Instead, he pointed to a cluster of rocks near the trail and signaled for them to follow. They hesitated, afraid of being trapped. But when Casa knelt and placed his hand to the earth, water bubbled up from a hidden spring. He had saved them without a single spoken word. From that moment, he walked with them in silence, helping without being asked. He showed them where the ground grew soft enough to dig for water. He taught them to read the birds that circled overhead. He led them away from paths where tracks told of predators or raiders. They reached the settlement because of him now. Months later, he stood facing the oncoming riders. It's the same stillness in his stance that he had shown on that first day. Ilara watched from behind him, gripping the trough with both hands as another wave of pain climbed up her spine. She closed her eyes and took shallow breaths, fighting the panic clawing at her chest. The riders drew close enough for Ilara to see the leather straps across their chests, the long rifles slung behind them, and the cold way they scanned every part of the settlement. They were not strangers to violence. They were men who took what they wanted without hesitation. Their leader rode ahead on a dark horse, shoulders wide, jaw set, eyes narrow from years under the sun. He lifted his chin at Casa. "You stand alone, Apache." Casa did not move. "I stand where I choose." The leader's gaze flicked toward Ilara, then to the other settlers gathering behind her. "Looks like you picked a poor place to plant yourself." Flint moved closer to Ilara, but Casa lifted a hand to stop him. His voice stayed even. "You ride with hunger in your eyes. Hunger for more than food. We ride with purpose. You people settled on land that is not yours to take." Geron bristled. "This land was empty when we came. No one claimed it." The leader ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on Casa. "3 times you interfered with our hunts. 3 times you blocked our path. 3 times you stole what was ours." Casa stepped forward, not a hint of fear in his movements. "I protected what needed protecting." A murmur rose among the riders, low and dangerous. Ilara felt her heart tighten. She knew nothing about what Casa had done before joining them. She knew he had secrets. She knew something heavy lived behind his silence, but she never imagined it would catch up to them now. The leader leaned on his saddle horn. "I'm a patient man, Apache, but patience ends. Today, we settle everything." Casa's eyes glinted with something unreadable. Today is not yours to claim. Before anyone could speak again, a sharp grip of pain shot through Alara, forcing her forward. Her breath hitched. She bit down on a cry. Jiran grabbed her shoulders to steady her. "Alara," he whispered, fear shaking through him. Flint's voice rose in alarm. "It's starting. She can't take this out here." The leader's gaze snapped back to her, then to Casa, suspicion tightening his features. "What is this? Another burden for you to protect." Lara fought for breath, sweat building at her hairline. Her vision blurred at the edges, and for a moment the world shrank to the pounding inside her chest. She tried to stay upright, tried to refuse the fear pressing into her ribs, but her body shook with the effort. Casa glanced back at her, and in his eyes she saw a storm gathering. Not fear, not panic. Something fierce. Something ancient. The riders shifted uneasily. Sensing the change in the air, Jero tried to lift Alara, but another wave of pain forced her to brace herself against him. "We need to get her inside," he said, voice cracking. "No," Casa replied quickly. "Not yet." Flint stared at him. "What do you mean, not yet? She can't stand out here like this." Casa looked from Alara to the riders, then to the sky. The wind changed direction, brushing against his hair like a whisper. Something unsettled stirred in the air, a tension thick enough to taste. "Alara," he said softly, "you must stay strong. The child listens to you." She swallowed against the pain, forcing her voice steady. "I'm trying." The leader motioned to his men. "Take the settlement. Leave nothing standing." Before they could move, Casa stepped forward sharply, raising his voice with a command that froze even the riders. 3 times a day, the desert tests us. You chose the wrong test." The leader frowned. "Stop speaking riddles." Casa took another step, shoulders squared. "You brought danger to a woman in labor. The spirits watch you now." Riders hesitated. Even men hardened by violence carried old fears in their hearts. Fears born from stories whispered around campfires. The leader's jaw tensed. "I don't care about your spirits. Move aside." Casa did not move. Behind him, Alara clung to the trough again as another wave tightened through her. She gasped, breath sharp, legs trembling. Everything hung in a fragile balance. One step, one movement, one breath. Casa reached for the weapon at his side, not with fear, but with purpose. In the moment before steel touched air, the sky darkened, the wind shifted again, and the first rider raised his gun. Nothing was resolved. Nothing was safe. Everything was about to break. Casa's hand closed around the hilt of his blade, but he did not draw it yet. His eyes locked on the rider who had raised his gun, reading every small twitch of muscle, every uncertain shift of weight. The wind grew harsher, pushing sand across the open ground in thin, sweeping lines. The whole settlement seemed to hold its breath. Even the horses of the riders stepped uneasily, their ears flicking back as if sensing a storm that had nothing to do with the sky. Alara tried to steady herself as another wave tightened around her middle. She clutched the trough so hard her fingers ached. The pain came harder now, rolling through her in deep, powerful surges. Fear twisted inside her, not for herself alone, but for the life she carried. Her breath came ragged, but she forced herself to stay upright. The settlement needed to believe she was strong. Jiran held one of her arms, Flint the other, both trying to shield her, though their own hands trembled. The riders did not move yet, caught between the threat of Casa and the strange timing of the moment. Their leader narrowed his eyes, dissatisfaction darkening his face. He wanted control. He wanted certainty. But Casa's presence created neither. An Alara's condition added a tension none of them had expected. "What is she to you?" the leader asked sharply, voice slicing through the wind. Casa did not look away from the man with the raised gun. "She is under my protection." The leader spat into the sand. "Protection. You Apache always wrap your words in pride, but pride won't save her." Casa remained still, but there was a shift in the air around him, like the quiet before lightning hits the ground. "You do not understand what you threaten." The man with the gun hesitated, his finger tightening and loosening as doubt flickered over his face. raiding villages, stealing supplies, intimidating settlers, all that came easy to men like him. But harming a woman in labor carried a weight that even the worst kinds of men did not take lightly. It felt like waking a curse, stirring something ancient, inviting darkness that had no shape. The leader noticed the hesitation and scowled. Don't grow soft. They chose to settle on a land that belongs to no one but those strong enough to hold it. The rider swallowed nervously. But before he could lower his gun, another sharp cry escaped Alara. She bent forward, nearly falling if Jiran had not caught her. Sweat dripped down her face, and her legs trembled under the force of the pain. Flint glanced helplessly toward Casa. She can't take much more. We have to move her, Casa said again, but there was a tightness in his voice this time. If you move her now, you will put her life in danger. We'll put her life in danger if we just stand here, Jiran snapped. We need shelter. She needs water. She needs to trust the land beneath her, Casa replied firmly. Her child will come fast. Alara squeezed her eyes shut. I can't stay here much longer, Casa drew in a slow breath. You must. For a moment longer, before Jiran could argue again, a loud crack thundered across the plains. For one horrifying heartbeat, everyone froze, unsure whether the sound came from a gunshot or the sky. Then they realized it came from neither. It came from the ground itself. The dry earth behind the riders split open in a jagged line, sending a ripple through the sand. The horses panicked, rearing and pulling against their riders. Fear flashed across their faces as they struggled to regain control. The leader jerked his reins hard, cursing under his breath. What kind of trick is this? He shouted. Casa's voice cut through the chaos, low and steady. The land is restless. It knows when blood should not be spilled. The leader glared at him. You expect me to fear cracks in the dirt, not the cracks? Casa replied softly. What comes after? A chill drifted over the settlement despite the burning heat. Alara felt it run down her spine. The air grew heavier, as if something unseen pressed on her chest. Even Jiran and Flint sensed it, exchanging worried glances. The riders finally brought their horses under control. The leader looked around, unsettled, but unwilling to show it. Enough of this. We finish what we came to do, he nodded to the man with the raised gun. The rider steadied his aim. Hilair's breath stopped, and then, from the far edge of the settlement, a voice rang out. Hold your fire. All heads turned. Two figures emerged from behind the largest cabin, both carrying rifles but pointed toward the ground. The first was a woman with a dark shawl, her features sharp with tension. The second was a tall young man with sandy hair tied back at the nape of his neck. Flint exhaled in shock. Ashra and Calder. They came back. Jiran looked just as surprised. Where have they been? The newcomers moved quickly but not recklessly. Ashra kept her shawl tight, eyes steady on the riders. Calder raised a hand toward Casa in a silent greeting. Then his gaze shifted to Alara and fear crossed his face. She's close, he whispered to Ashra. Ashra nodded, jaw tight. We knew it would happen soon. Just not like this. The riders turned their guns toward the newcomers, but the leader gestured for them to wait. Who are they? Calder stepped forward, voice louder this time. People you should have avoided. Alara felt the tension rise even higher. Ashra and Calder had left the settlement weeks ago after an argument with Jiran and Flint about supplies. The group had been splitting apart back then, cracks forming between even the strongest bonds. Asha believed the settlement needed stronger defenses. Jiran believed they needed cooperation with the land and the Apache. Flint wanted to relocate farther north. Calder wanted to follow Casa's guidance. None of them agreed on the path. Their disappearance left wounds that had never healed. Seeing them now brought both relief and suspicion. Casa did not look surprised by their arrival. He never did when strange things happened, as if life simply unfolded exactly how he expected. He gave Ashra a small nod that she returned with seriousness. The leader eyed them with irritation. Another pair of settlers, hardly worth my concern. You should be concerned, Ashra said in a calm, almost chilling tone. You ride into a place that carries a promise older than your greed, Calder added. If you spill blood here today, you won't outrun what follows, the leader scoffed. Superstition. Casa finally shifted his stance. It was small, but enough to send a message. Not superstition. Warnings. The man with the gun grew pale. His hand trembled now, the barrel wavering. The leader shifted irritably. Stop shaking. The rider shook his head. I feel something wrong. Like a weight. Like eyes on me? It is the land, Casa said. No, Alara whispered, gripping the trough. It's more than that. All eyes turned to her, even the riders. She swallowed hard. When Rowan disappeared, the ground felt like this. Heavy. Watching. Like it wanted to tell us something but couldn't. Duran stiffened at the mention of Rowan. Flint lowered his head. The memory still haunted them. The leader looked between them, unsettled, but unwilling to show fear. Enough of this nonsense. We take the settlement now. He raised his arm to signal the attack, but before it could fall, Ashra stepped forward. Pushing her shawl aside to reveal a carved wooden symbol hanging around her neck. It was old, weathered, shaped like a spiral curled into a single point. Ilara inhaled sharply when she saw it. She had seen the symbol once before. Rowan carried a similar carving the day he disappeared. He told her it was given by an Apache elder. A promise of safe passage. A sign of guidance. Ashra held it high. This marks sacred ground. You strike here. You strike against the spirits that walk with the Apache. The riders grew restless again. Even the leader hesitated. Casa remained silent, but his eyes burned with meaning. He stepped closer to Ashra, then turned his gaze to the leader. 3 warnings were already given, he said. This is your last. The leader looked shaken for the first time. Sweat gathered at his brow. His horse shifted beneath him, ears pinned back. But pride is a difficult chain to break. He tightened his reins and snarled. Superstitions don't scare me. He dropped his arm. The rider fired. The shot cracked like thunder. The bullet missed. Casa by a breath and struck the wooden post behind him. Splintering it apart, chaos erupted instantly. The riders surged forward. Settlers scrambled for cover. Sand whipped through the air. Horses screamed and reared. Jeron pulled Alara into his arms, trying to drag her toward the nearest cabin, but another wave of pain tore through her, and she couldn't move. Flint fired the first shot from their side. Hitting the ground near the riders to force them apart, Ashra and Calder ducked behind the cabin wall. Reloading.Kasa moved with the speed of a man shaped by battle. Stepping into the open to face the riders head-on, Ilara screamed as another contraction gripped her hard. Her legs buckled, and she fell to her knees. Duran caught her before she hit the ground, panic flooding his face. Ilara, hold on. She couldn't speak. Her breath came in broken gasps. The sky darkened further. The wind roared. The earth trembled again. Something ancient stirred beneath the ground. The conflict surged around them. Nothing was safe. No one was ready. And the real storm had only begun. Casa moved like a shadow across the sand, fast and sure, each step carving a path through the chaos. The riders thundered toward the settlement, swinging rifles, shouting orders, kicking up swirls of dust that clouded the air. The ground trembled under the force of hooves. Wind whipped against faces and hair. Nothing felt steady anymore. Nothing felt safe. Ilara clung to Jaren's arm, unable to stand as another contraction tore through her with fierce strength. She cried out, the sound raw and sharp, but it was lost inside the storm of battle rising around them. Jaron knelt beside her, one arm wrapped around her shoulders to keep her upright as sweat rolled down her temples. Flint crouched nearby with his rifle, firing shot after shot, trying to push the riders back before they reached the cabins. Casa, Ilara gasped. Searching for him through the haze, she caught a glimpse of him as he lunged toward the lead rider's horse. Grabbing the bridle and twisting hard, the horse reared with a wild scream, forcing the rider off balance. Casa used the moment to pull the man down from the saddle, sending him crashing into the dirt. Before the rider could rise, Casa kicked the weapon from his grasp and pushed him aside. More riders closed in. Casa didn't hesitate. He moved with a calm fury that came from deep inside him, striking down threats before they reached the settlers. But there were too many, and the settlement offered too little cover. Flint fired again. But the wind carried his aim off, forcing him to retreat behind the trough. "Duran," he shouted, "we can't hold them like this." Duran wiped the sweat from his brow with one shaking hand. "We have to try. She can't move." Alara grabbed his shirt, her voice breaking. "I can't stay here. I'm trying, but I can't." The pain built fast, stronger, deeper. Her breath came fast and uneven. Fear crawled through her chest. The world spun, and the noise of the battle blurred into a distant roar. Ashra darted from behind the cabin, her shawl flying behind her like a dark flag. She fired a clean shot at a rider charging from the left, hitting the sand near his horse's hooves. The horse stumbled, throwing the rider off balance. Calder dashed out beside her, signaling for Flint to move nearer to them. "Alara needs shelter," Ashra called over the wind. "We have to get her inside before she didn't finish." A rider aimed toward her. Calder lunged and pushed her out of the way, the bullet ripping into the wooden cabin wall instead of striking her. Ashra stumbled, her shawl dropping from her shoulder as Calder pulled her to safety. The settlement became a swirl of movement. Riders circling. Settlers firing. Sand lifting off the ground in violent bursts. The air tasted of dust and tension. Each breath heavy with fear. Casa stopped near the trough, raising his blade to block a rider's downward strike. The metal clashed with a sharp ring. He pushed back, grabbed the rider's arm, and ripped him from the saddle. The rider hit the dirt hard, groaning. Another rider aimed a rifle straight at Lara. Flint saw it first. "Jaren down," tackled both Alara and Jaren to the ground just as the shot cracked through the air. The bullet tore through the wooden edge of the trough, sending splinters flying. Alara cried out again, this time from fear as much as pain. Casa's head snapped toward the sound. Something fierce shifted in his eyes, something deeper than duty. He sprinted across the sand, closing the distance in seconds. Before the rider could fire again, Casa leaped onto the horse from the side, yanked the rifle away, and kicked the man off the saddle. The rider landed flat, struggling for breath as Casa spun the horse around and sent it bolting into the open desert. Away from the settlement, but the danger didn't stop. More riders approached, surrounding the settlement from every angle. There was no escape route, no safe path. The settlers were trapped. Duran held Alara close, trying to keep her steady. "Breathe. You need to breathe with the pain." Lara clenched her teeth. "It's too strong. Jaren, it's too soon. It's coming." Duran felt panic rising in him like wildfire. He looked at Casa, then at the riders pushing closer, then at the dark sky rumbling above them. "Flint," he said, voice shaking, "we need a plan or she won't survive this." Before Flint could answer, the earth trembled again, this time harder, a deep, groaning sound rolled through the ground like something shifting far below the surface. Horses bucked wildly. Riders lost control. The sand rippled like water sloshing in a shallow basin. Calder stared at the ground beneath his boots. "It's happening again." Ashra grabbed his arm. "The land is warning them. It's trying to make them leave." But the leader of the riders snarled over the chaos, refusing to retreat. "Ignore the shaking. The Apache is lying. Take everything." He raised his gun and aimed it at Casa. Alara saw it. Her breath froze. "Casa." She screamed. The shot fired. Casa ducked, rolling across the sand. The bullet struck the ground where he had stood moments before. He rose to his feet, blade ready, sprinted toward the leader with speed that cut through the air like a knife. 3 riders attempted to intercept him. Casa dodged the first, struck the second across the shoulder, and knocked the third clean from his horse. But the leader fired again, forcing Casa to dive behind the trough. Sand burst around them as bullets struck the ground in rapid shots. Alara gripped Jaren's arm tightly, her voice trembling. He's outnumbered. He can't hold them all. Jaren swallowed hard. He'll fight anyway. The riders regrouped quickly, forming a half-circle aiming inward. They began to advance. Their shadows stretched long and sharp across the sand. Closing in with slow determination, Ashra and Calder fired shot after shot, forcing the riders to scatter again. Flint darted behind a broken wagon, firing at their horses' legs to force them off path. But there were more riders than bullets, and soon ammunition began to run low. Jaren turned back to Alara. "We have to move you now." "We don't have a choice." Lara shook her head, groaning through the pain. "I can't walk." "I can't." "You don't need to," he said. "Hold on to me. I'll carry you." He bent to lift her, but Casa appeared beside them in a heartbeat, grabbing Jaren's shoulder before he could move her. "No," Casa said firmly. "She stays here. The ground beneath her is the safest place right now."
Ow.
Jaren stared at him. "The safest?" "Casa, she's in the open. They're closing in." Casa's eyes shifted to Alara, and for the first time she saw fear hidden behind his strength. Not fear of the riders. Fear of losing her and the child. "Ilara," he whispered, kneeling beside her, "the land is holding you. It has not let you fall yet. Trust it. Trust me." Another contraction racked her body. She squeezed his hand with everything she had left. "I'm trying," the leader of the riders shouted. "Take them. All of them." His men charged. Casa rose to his feet, blade drawn. Standing between Alara and the oncoming danger, the sky roared with thunder. The earth shook again. Harder than before, a crack split across the sand, racing straight between the riders and the settlers. Horses screamed and pulled back. Men fell from saddles. Dust flew upward in a spiraling column. The air grew colder in an instant, as if something ancient had risen to the surface. A gust of wind swept through the settlement with unnatural force, knocking down loose boards and rattling windows. Jeron shielded Ilara. With his body, Flint covered his head with his arms. Ashra and Calder pressed against the cabin wall. Casa stood in the open, unmoving, staring into the heart of the spiraling dust. The riders stumbled back, shouting in fear as their horses tried to flee. Even their leader struggled to remain on his saddle. "What is this?" he yelled, voice cracking. Casa tightened his grip on his blade. "The desert watches those who break its laws." Ilara breathed hard, her vision blurring. Her body trembled with every contraction. Her pulse hammered through her ears. She felt like she was standing on the edge of two worlds. The storm rose higher. The riders faltered. Casa stepped forward, ready to make his final stand, and then Alara screamed, the pain hitting her with a force that bent her. To her knees, everything stopped. Everyone turned. Her time had come, and the storm was far from over. The moment Alara screamed, the whole world shifted. The storm that had risen from the earth still roared. The cracks running through the sand still shook under the weight of something ancient, but all eyes turned to her. Her breath came in short, broken gasps as she gripped the wooden trough. Her fingers shook, her face pale, her body folding forward under the force of the next wave. Jaren held her shoulders, Flint steadied her arm, and even Ashra stepped from behind the cabin. Fear etched across her face, but the riders froze. For the first time since the confrontation began, the men on horseback looked uncertain, not because of the shaking ground, not because of Casa's stance or the strange winds, but because they suddenly understood the reality before them. A woman was giving birth in the open desert, and they were the cause of her suffering. Some shifted uneasily. Others lowered their weapons out of instinct, even hardened. Men who lived by steel and cruelty felt the weight of a life arriving in a moment like this. The leader, still gripping his reins, clenched his jaw. Sweat ran down his temples. His horse pranced nervously beneath him, sensing the tension. He looked between Casa and Alara, torn between pride and fear. Casa saw the hesitation. He stepped forward, voice firm but steady. "Take your men and leave. The desert has shown you its warning. If you stay, It will not spare you again." The leader glared, his pride wounded. "You can't dictate terms to me, Apache." Casa's eyes hardened. "The land dictates the terms, not me." Another rumble rolled beneath their feet, deeper than before, and the wind howled around them. The riders' horses jerked back violently, fear running through their bodies. The riders struggled to stay mounted. One man was thrown to the ground entirely, groaning in pain. The leader realized then that the battle was no longer between men. Something older, something unseen, had taken the fight out of his hands. He glanced at Alara, her face contorted in pain, sweat soaking her hairline as she cried out again. There was something in her struggle that struck him differently, something that softened the edge of his anger. He jerked the reins sharply. "Fall back. Pull away." The other riders hesitated, shocked. "What about the supplies?" one asked. "What about the settlement?" Another shouted. The leader's eyes flashed with frustration, but fear won. "I said fall back. We leave now." One by one, the riders turned their horses away, backing up slowly at first. Then, as the wind surged again, they kicked their horses into full retreat. The ground finally steadied as they disappeared over the ridge, swallowed by the plains. Only when the last rider vanished did the wind settle. The dust spirals faded. The earth stopped shaking. A heavy silence fell across the settlement. Casa dropped to his knees beside Alara. "Alara," he said softly, brushing the hair from her face. "It is time." She let out a shaky laugh, half sob, half relief. "I know." Jaren knelt on her other side. "We need to get her inside. Now." But Alara shook her head, her breath caught between pain and instinct. "There's no time. It's happening here." Ashra moved swiftly. "Then we help her here." Calder sprinted to grab blankets from the cabin, while Flint fetched water from the trough. Duran steadied Alara as she groaned through another contraction. Casa held her hand. "You have the strength. The desert tested you, and you endured." Lara gripped his hand tighter. "Just don't leave me." "I won't," he said, voice steady. "Not now. Not ever." The pains came stronger, closer, until the world around her vanished. The settlement, the storm, the fear, even the sky above her disappeared in a haze of effort and determination. Everyone moved with purpose. Ashra guided her with a calm tone. Flint stood guard with his rifle in case the riders returned. Calder set blankets beneath her. Duran whispered encouragement. Ilara pushed, gasping for breath, tears streaking down her cheeks. Pain tore through her, but she fought through it. Clinging to Casa's hand as if it were her lifeline, minutes passed. Then the moment came. A cry rose into the air. Soft at first, then growing strong. A newborn. Ilara collapsed back, breath shaking, tears of exhaustion rolling down her face. Jaren laughed with relief. Flint dropped to one knee, covering his face with his hand. Ashra held the child carefully, wrapping the tiny body in a warm cloth. She looked up, eyes shimmering. "A boy," she whispered. "Strong lungs." "He's healthy," Lara sobbed, covering her mouth. Casa leaned closer, his voice gentle. "He arrived with the storm. He carries the desert's strength." Lara reached out, trembling. Ashra placed the baby in her arms. The small, warm weight settled against her chest. The child's dark eyes blinked up at her, and a soft whimper escaped his lips. "He's beautiful," she whispered. Casa placed a hand on the baby's back, his expression softening in a way Alara had never seen before. "He will grow to be a warrior of both worlds." Jaren wiped his eyes. "Rowan would have been proud." "More than anything," Alara swallowed, emotion thick in her throat. "He would." The settlement seemed to exhale all at once, the fear finally lifting from the air. The people slowly gathered around, some offering blankets, others bringing water, all united in the moment that had replaced terror with new life. Flint lowered his rifle. "We made it through." Ashra nodded. "With a little help from the land?" Calder glanced at Casa, and from him? Casa didn't answer. His attention stayed on Alara and the child, its expression solemn and full of quiet meaning. Alara looked up at him, tears still clinging to her lashes. "Casa, You saved us. You saved my child. Asa shook his head. You saved yourself. You endured every trial the desert set before you. I only stood beside you. She smiled, weak but full of gratitude. You stood beside me when no one else could. For a moment, the world around them felt still and warm. The raging storm seemed distant now. The cracks in the earth had settled. The wind softened against the cabins. The settlement felt reborn alongside the child. Hours passed as everyone worked together to repair what had been damaged. They lifted fallen boards, gathered scattered supplies, and checked each cabin for safety. Even so, a deeper understanding settled over them. They had survived something greater than a raid. They had witnessed a warning from the land, a reminder that life and nature walked hand in hand. Later, as the orange glow of sunset spread across the plains, Alara sat wrapped in blankets outside her cabin, the baby resting peacefully against her chest. Casa sat beside her, silent but present. Jaron and Flint checked the perimeter while Ashra and Calder gathered wood for a small fire. Ilara looked at the sky, the warm colors reflecting in her tired eyes. I thought I would lose everything today. Casa leaned slightly closer. Instead, you gained something stronger. She looked down at the baby. I want to name him after the storm. After the strength that carried us? Casa tilted his head. What name do you choose? She thought for a moment, then whispered Talon. Casa nodded. A powerful name. Ilada traced the baby's cheek. He'll have both sides of the world in him, the settler's hope and the Apache's strength. Casa looked at her, and something soft and deep rested in his gaze. He will have your courage. The wind carried a warm breath across the settlement. For the first time in months, the land felt calm, balanced, as if it had accepted them. Jaron approached with a smile. The riders won't be back. Not after what they saw. Flint joined him. They'll tell stories about this place, about the ground that rose against them, Ashra added. Stories that keep them far away. Ilara held Talon closer. Good. Let them stay far. Casa stood slowly. This land will protect him, and I will protect both of you. Alara lifted her eyes to him. Stay with us. Stay here. Casa paused, then nodded once firmly. I will stay. The fire crackled. The sky darkened into night. The settlement settled into a peaceful quiet it hadn't known in a long time. Alara watched her son sleep, her heart finally at ease. They had survived the storm. They had found their strength. And the desert, once harsh and unforgiving, now felt like home.